The street lamp flickered above the cracked sidewalk, casting long, uneven shadows across the quiet cul-de-sac. Marcus Whitaker's Labrador, Duke, tugged at the leash, ears perked, sniffing the damp air. He breathed out clouds of cold night, the rhythmic slap of shoes against pavement echoing in the empty street. Then the siren cut through the silence. Not a chase, just a patrol car easing to a stop behind him. "Evening, sir. Mind telling me why you're out so late?" The officer's tone was smooth, practiced casual, but Marcus felt the weight beneath the words, the suspicion. He lifted his hands, unclenching the leash. "Just walking my dog, officer. It's routine." The officer stepped closer, flashlight cutting across Marcus's face. "Routine, huh? You know this neighborhood isn't exactly safe. You got ID on you?" The words were calm, but the menace in the pause was sharp, deliberate. Marcus felt his chest tighten, his pulse drumming in his ears. Something about the way the man stared. Like he already judged him, like he wanted to break him before the law even mattered. "You're acting like I should be scared," Marcus said quietly. "Like I don't belong out here." The officer sneered. "Maybe you shouldn't." Duke whimpered, tugging slightly. The officer's hand rested near his belt, near the nightstick. Marcus's heart sank, realization slicing through the tension. One wrong move, one word, and this could escalate. And then, in that suspended moment between streetlights and shadows, Marcus felt the world tilt. He didn't know yet that this night would change everything. Not just for him, but for the man who believed power made him untouchable. The officer reached for his radio. The street was empty except for the soft, rhythmic slap of Duke's paws against the wet pavement. Marcus Whitaker exhaled a cloud of cold night air, tugging his jacket tighter around his shoulders. A single street lamp flickered overhead, the yellow light splintering across puddles, the shadows long and distorted. He liked these walks. They gave him space to think, to breathe. But tonight, something felt off. A patrol car rolled slowly behind him, red and blue lights muted but visible in the dark. Marcus stopped, unclenching Duke's leash. "Evening, sir. Mind telling me why you're out so late?" The voice was casual, practiced, but Marcus heard the undertone. Suspicion, accusation, threat. Marcus straightened. "Just walking my dog. It's routine." The officer, Ryan, stepped closer, flashlight slicing across Marcus's face. He leaned against the car, tone deceptively friendly. "Routine, huh? You know this neighborhood isn't exactly safe. You got ID on you?" Marcus's chest tightened. He reached for his wallet. "Yes, officer. Here. Thanks." The flashlight lingered a moment too long on Marcus's face, then moved to the dog. "And this little guy, he's friendly?" Duke whined softly, stepping back. Marcus felt the pull of tension in his chest. The officer's smile was sharp, polite, and dangerous all at once. "You're acting like I should be scared," Marcus said quietly. "Like I don't belong out here." "Maybe you shouldn't." Marcus froze. The words were calm, measured, but they cut deeper than any shouted insult. The officer's hand hovered near his belt, fingers brushing against the nightstick. Marcus's mind raced. One wrong move, one misstep, and it could escalate beyond a simple stop. "Just trying to enjoy my evening," Marcus said, forcing steady breaths. "I've done nothing wrong." Ryan tilted his head, eyeing him with a practiced appraisal. "You might not see it, but sometimes the line between right and wrong isn't clear at night." Marcus felt the words press like weights. He knew this wasn't about law or right. It was about power, about who got to walk without suspicion, and who had to justify their existence on the sidewalk. "Give me your ID," Ryan said. Marcus's hand shook slightly as he handed over his wallet. The metal badge on the officer's chest caught the streetlight. Marcus forced himself not to flinch, not to protest too loudly. Every instinct screamed to run, to argue, to resist. But he also knew how quickly resistance could turn into danger. The officer studied the ID for what felt like eternity, his lips twitching in a smirk Marcus couldn't read. Duke nudged Marcus's leg, low whine in his throat. Marcus patted him, grounding himself. "You live around here?" Ryan asked finally, voice neutral now, but the tension remained. "Yes," Marcus said. "A few blocks over." "All right. Just be careful, okay?" It's a dangerous night for people like you. The words landed with the force of a hammer. People like him. Marcus felt something cold trickle down his spine. He forced a nod, retrieving his ID with trembling fingers. Of course, officer. Ryan returned the ID, gave a nod, and stepped back toward the patrol car. Marcus exhaled, hands shaking. Duke leaned against him, sensing the release but not the tension. As the patrol car pulled away, Marcus stayed rooted to the spot, staring at the retreating taillights. The night seemed heavier, the shadows deeper. He knew this encounter wouldn't be the last. And deep down, a chill of realization settled. One day, the world might demand more than quiet compliance. A sudden sound of radio chatter from the patrol car jolted Marcus. He flinched. The officer's voice, calm, collected, unaware, murmured something into the mic that made Marcus's stomach knot. Somewhere beneath the streetlights, in the stillness of the night, Marcus realized his encounter was only the beginning, and the man who held power over him believed it would remain that way. Marcus could still feel the weight of Officer Ryan's words pressing against him as he walked back through the quiet streets toward his apartment. The cold bit his fingers, but it wasn't the chill that made his hands shake. It was the knowledge that the man who had stopped him believed he could instill fear with just a few sentences. He entered his building, Duke padding behind him, tail lowered. The lobby was dim, the hum of fluorescent lights filling the silence. Marcus fumbled with the key, still hearing Ryan's voice in his head. It's a dangerous night for people like you. Dangerous. Not illegal. Dangerous. The words weren't about the law. They were about control, about reminding him where he supposedly belonged. Duke nudged his leg, low whine. Marcus knelt, rubbing the dog's ears, trying to calm himself. It's okay, boy, he murmured. We're safe now. But even as he said it, he knew the fear didn't leave so easily. The next morning, Marcus tried to put the encounter behind him. At the office, he attempted normalcy, emails, meetings, the constant hum of fluorescent lights and keyboards. But the memory of Ryan's smirk lingered, threading into every glance over his shoulder. It wasn't until lunch that Marcus realized the threat hadn't ended with the night. He stepped outside, phone in hand, scrolling through messages, when he noticed a patrol car idling a block away. Same model, same reflective stripes. His stomach tightened. He ducked into a nearby cafe, ordering a coffee and sliding into a booth by the window. He tried to read the news on his phone, but every headline blurred. Duke, usually calm at home, would have been pacing beside him if he were here, Marcus thought grimly. The door chimed, and a familiar voice floated over the quiet hum of conversation. Marcus Whitaker. He froze. Ryan, in the corner, leaning casually against the counter, talking to someone in a low voice. Marcus didn't know who it was, but the way Ryan's gaze flicked toward him, cold and calculating, made his pulse spike. Marcus leaned back, trying to appear casual, heart hammering. He overheard fragments of Ryan's conversation. Keep an eye on him. Make sure he knows the rules. Don't let him think he can just... The words were deliberate, threatening, chilling. Marcus's hands tightened around his coffee cup. Every instinct screamed that Ryan was signaling him, reminding him that his presence, his very existence, was being monitored. A waitress approached. Sir, everything okay? Marcus nodded, voice tight. Yes, thank you. He tried to focus on a latte, the warmth seeping through his hands, the hum of life continuing around him, but the tension had lodged itself inside him, permanent and uncomfortable. Later that afternoon, Marcus returned to his apartment to find a letter slipped under his door. No envelope, no name, just typed words. You should think twice before walking at night. Some rules aren't meant to be challenged. Marcus's stomach knotted. The threat was real, unmistakable. His first thought was to call the police. But which one? Ryan's colleagues might not take him seriously, or worse, they could side with the officer. His mind raced. Escalation, exposure, danger. He sank into his chair, Duke curling against his legs. What are you supposed to do when the system itself feels like it's against you? Marcus whispered to the dog. Duke looked up, eyes wide, as if understanding more than words could express. The next evening, Marcus tried again to walk Duke, but each step felt heavier than the last. The shadows seemed deeper, The silence louder. Every distant footstep, every rustle of leaves made him flinch. Marcus Whitaker. The shout came from the dark. His blood ran cold. Ryan stepped out from behind a parked car, flashlight in hand. Expression unreadable. "Evening," he said casual, but the tension in his stance betrayed him. "Taking another stroll?" Marcus stopped, tightening his grip on Duke's leash. "Yes, officer. And again, I've done nothing wrong." Ryan's lips curved in that practiced, dangerous smirk. "I know that, but some people don't understand boundaries. You don't want to test mine." Marcus felt rage flare, quick and bright, tempered by fear. "Boundaries? You think this is about boundaries? You stopped me because of the color of my skin. You're threatening me. That's not a boundary, it's harassment." Ryan's expression hardened slightly. "Careful, Marcus. Words like that, they carry consequences." Marcus took a step forward. "Consequences? I'm living my life, walking my dog. Who's at fault here? Me? Or the man abusing his badge to make people like me afraid of the night?" For a moment, Ryan's face tightened, a flicker of something Marcus couldn't read. And then it was gone, replaced by the same cold control. "Remember, Marcus, not everyone is as forgiving as I am." Duke growled low, sensing the tension, shifting closer to Marcus. The growl seemed to make Ryan pause, just slightly. Marcus's own heartbeat thundered, adrenaline burning in his chest. "You don't get to decide who feels safe," Marcus said, voice steady despite the fear. "Not you, not anyone." Ryan's eyes narrowed. He stepped closer, hand hovering near his belt. "Maybe not, but I get to enforce the law. And laws, they can be very flexible." Marcus's throat tightened. Every instinct screamed to leave, to retreat, but he refused. "Not tonight. Not this time. Enforcement isn't an excuse for fear. Not when it's used to intimidate. Not when it's used to oppress." Ryan's smirk returned. "Watch yourself, Marcus. Some lines shouldn't be crossed." And with that, he retreated to his patrol car, sliding behind the wheel without another word. The engine purred softly, lights flickering as it drove off into the distance. Marcus exhaled slowly, Duke's leash slackening in his hands. He felt relief, but it was shallow, fragile. The threat hadn't ended. It had only been made explicit. Back in his apartment, Marcus poured a drink, hands trembling. He called his closest friend, Jason, pacing the living room. "Jason, I can't even walk my dog without being harassed," Marcus said, voice tight. "I handed over my ID. I followed every rule. And he still makes it personal. It's like he thinks he owns the night, and I'm just nothing." Jason's voice was firm on the other end. "Marcus, that's not just harassment. That's abuse of power. You need to document everything. Video, photos, notes. Don't confront him alone again." Marcus nodded, tension coiling like a spring. I know, but it's exhausting, Jason. Every day, every night, like I have to justify my existence." "Exactly," Jason said, "which is why you can't let him win. You can't let fear dictate your life." Marcus looked at Duke, curled on the couch, tail thumping lightly against the cushion. I want to live without watching my back all the time." Jason sighed. "And you will. But first you have to be smart. You have to fight this the right way. Not just for you, for everyone who's been treated like this." The line went quiet. Marcus stared at the ceiling, fatigue washing over him, but beneath it, a spark of determination remained. He would fight, not just for himself, but for the principle, the message that intimidation and prejudice would not define his life. Days passed. Each walk, each glance over his shoulder reminded him of Ryan's presence. Every coded gesture, every casual remark from others in the neighborhood felt like an echo of that threat. And Marcus knew, with a certainty that gnawed his bones, that this wasn't over. One evening, as he returned from walking Duke, he noticed a shadow across the hallway. Not Ryan, not yet, but someone had left another note, this time slipped beneath his apartment door. "Keep to your place. Not all nights are forgiving." Marcus's hands shook, but this time, fear was tempered with resolve. He crumpled the note, glancing down at Duke, whose steady gaze seemed to anchor him. The shadows of the city no longer just threatened. They called him to act. Somewhere in the silence of the night, Marcus understood. The night wasn't just dark. It was a test, and he wasn't about to be broken. The line between threat and courage blurred, and Marcus realized that to survive and to demand justice, he had to transform fear into action. Marcus's day started like any other. Emails, conference calls, the hum of fluorescent lights above him. But the shadow of Officer Ryan lingered, insidious and unyielding. Even in the middle of the office, he felt the weight of those words. It's a dangerous night for people like you. Dangerous. Not criminal. Dangerous. He pushed the memory away, telling himself to focus. But by lunchtime, the weight was too heavy. He needed air, needed to remind himself that life could still feel normal, even in a city that whispered caution with every glance. The cafe was bustling, midday sunlight streaming through the windows, illuminating the coffee steam swirling above mugs. Marcus slid into a booth near the back, Duke waiting at home. He tried to read the news on his phone, scrolling absent-mindedly when he heard the voice. Marcus Whitaker. Over here. He froze, his stomach knotting. The voice was unmistakable. Ryan. The officer leaned against the counter in that same casual way, talking low to a colleague, smirking at the barista like the world belonged to him. Marcus clenched his fist beneath the table, gripping the edge of the seat. Every instinct screamed retreat, but he couldn't let him see fear. Not here, not in public, not again. Ryan glanced toward him, eyes narrowing, smirk widening. Funny running into you here. You're persistent, aren't you? Marcus forced a calm tone. Persistence beats intimidation, officer. Ryan laughed softly, a sound that grated against Marcus's nerves. You've got a lot of nerve, walking around acting like you're untouchable. Streets aren't safe for everyone, you know. Marcus leaned back, voice steady. I didn't act untouchable. I just lived my life. Ryan's colleague, a younger officer, laughed awkwardly, shifting weight. He's right, Marcus added quickly. Walking a dog shouldn't be a crime. Not in this country. Not for anyone. Ryan's gaze snapped toward him, eyes flashing with irritation. Not a crime yet, but people like you test boundaries. People like you make us uncomfortable. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. People like me? What exactly does that mean, officer? Does it mean I can't walk my dog at night? Or does it mean you think your badge gives you the right to dictate where I belong? The cafe seemed to fall silent around them. Customers shifted uneasily, glancing at the confrontation, sensing the tension. Ryan's hand twitched slightly toward his belt, though no weapon was drawn. Careful, Ryan said, voice lower now. Careful, Marcus. Not everyone appreciates your comments. Marcus leaned forward, voice cutting through the soft murmurs of the cafe. This isn't about comments. It's about accountability. You can't intimidate people because of their skin. That's not power. That's fear. And fear has limits. Ryan's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second, but it returned almost immediately. You think words can change anything? You think a complaint or a speech in a cafe does more than annoy someone in my position? I think it can, Marcus said, meeting his gaze. I know it can, because someone has to hold people like you accountable. Someone has to make sure fear isn't the law of the land. Ryan's colleague coughed, shifting uncomfortably, but Marcus didn't break eye contact. The cafe's noise returned slowly, the air filling with the scent of coffee and pastries. But between them, tension crackled like a live wire. You're bold, Ryan said, voice low. Too bold for your own good. And you're afraid of accountability, Marcus replied, sharp, precise. Afraid that someone might see the truth behind your badge, the way you use it to intimidate. I'm not afraid. Not anymore. For a moment, Ryan stared at him, expression unreadable. Then he straightened, smoothing his uniform, tone casual again. Enjoy your coffee, Marcus. Consider this a warning. Push too hard, and the consequences aren't just words. Marcus let out a slow breath. I'll take my chances. Ryan's smirk lingered as he walked away, but Marcus felt a shift within himself. Fear was still there, always there, but it was tempered with something else. Resolve. He would not be intimidated. Not by Ryan, not by the badge, not by the system. Later at the office, Marcus called his friend Jason, pacing between cubicles. Jason, you won't believe it. He was at the cafe today. Ryan, just standing there, smirking like he owns a place. Jason's voice was sharp, concerned. That's harassment. Pure and simple. Did anyone see? Some people, yeah, but it's subtle. He didn't do anything illegal, just implied everything. You could feel it, like a hand on your throat you can't see. That's exactly the problem. It's intimidation, but it's hidden in plain sight. That's the system. That's how it protects people like him. Marcus nodded, even though Jason couldn't see him. I'm documenting everything. Notes, dates, times. I don't know if it'll stop him, but I have to try. Good, Jason said, because this isn't just about you. This is about letting people like him know that abuse of power has consequences. Marcus hung up, eyes narrowing, determination solidifying. He couldn't control Ryan's actions, but he could control his response. He could build a record, speak up, demand accountability. Days later, Marcus attended a community forum on neighborhood safety. He sat quietly at the back, notes in hand, trying not to draw attention. To his shock, the moderator introduced Ryan as part of the panel. His stomach nodded. Ryan's presence was larger than life, commanding, confident, casually dismissive of questions from the audience. Marcus felt the old fear rise, but he swallowed it, letting his focus sharpen. He was here to observe, to document, to plan his next move. During the Q&A, Marcus raised his hand. Officer Ryan, he began, voice steady, clear. How do you justify treating citizens differently based on appearance? How do you respond to claims that your patrol tactics intimidate rather than protect? Ryan blinked, then laughed softly, like it was a joke. I treat people based on behavior. That's the law. If someone feels intimidated, that's perception, not action. Marcus's jaw tightened. Behavior? You stopped me, walking my dog at night. You questioned my presence, insinuated criminal intent, and threatened me, all because of how I look. The panel murmured. Ryan's smirk faltered, and Marcus pressed on. People like me have rights. Rights that extend beyond your badge, your patrol, and your assumptions. You may hold authority, but authority doesn't give you the right to instill fear. Ryan's eyes narrowed. Careful, Marcus. You're walking a fine line. I know, Marcus said, meeting his gaze, and I'm walking it deliberately. Because someone has to speak when fear is used as a weapon. Someone has to remind the system that intimidation isn't justice. The room fell quiet, tension thick. Some attendees nodded subtly, murmuring agreement. Marcus felt a spark of hope. He wasn't alone. The power of one man's bias had limits. Ryan left the forum shortly after, storming off under the guise of official business. But Marcus knew he had shaken the officer more than anyone realized. His words were small, but they carried weight. Evidence, accountability, defiance. That night, Marcus walked Duke through the same streets where Ryan had stopped him days ago. The street lamp flickered, shadows dancing across puddles. But this time, Marcus felt different. Fear was still present, yes, but mingled with clarity and resolve. Somewhere down the block, he imagined Ryan in his patrol car, realizing that intimidation could not silence truth. And Marcus understood something vital. Courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was persistence in spite of it. Duke nudged him, tail wagging slightly. Marcus smiled, patting the dog's head. He wasn't just walking home tonight. He was moving forward. Every step, every note, every word documented was a challenge to injustice. Every step was a promise. That fear wouldn't define him, and neither would Ryan. The night felt quieter now, not empty, not threatening. Marcus's eyes lingered on the shadows, but instead of dread, he felt vigilance. And deep down, a burning certainty. The confrontation wasn't over. Not yet, but he was ready. The next morning, Marcus sat in his apartment, Duke at his feet, staring at the stack of papers on the kitchen table. Complaints, forms, statements, all ready to be submitted to the local police department. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear this time, but from the weight of what he was about to do. Every word written felt like a declaration. He would not be silenced. He took a deep breath and dialed the non-emergency number. The line clicked, then a woman's voice answered. "Police department, how can I help you?" "Hi," Marcus said, keeping his voice steady. "I'd like to file a complaint about Officer Ryan, badge number 47. It's regarding harassment and racial profiling." There was a brief pause. "Do you have an incident number or reference?" Marcus shook his head. "No, this is a first step. I want it formally recorded." Another pause, longer this time. "All right, we can take a report. But just so you know, complaints like this are handled internally and, well, sometimes they don't result in any immediate action." Marcus's stomach sank. He had expected bureaucratic resistance, but the dismissiveness still stung. "I understand, but it's important that this is documented. This isn't just personal, it's systemic. I want accountability." A sigh, heavy through the phone. "Okay, can you come to the station to file this in person?" Marcus nodded, though she couldn't see him. "Yes, I'll be there." The station smelled of antiseptic and paper, fluorescent lights humming overhead. Marcus approached the front desk, hands slightly sweaty, Duke's leash in his pocket. Behind the counter, a clerk looked up, expression polite but detached. "Here to file a complaint," Marcus said. The clerk raised an eyebrow. "Against an officer?" "Yes, Officer Ryan, badge number 47. The clerk's tone shifted slightly. Practice neutrality. "We get a lot of complaints. They usually don't amount to much, but we can take your statement." Marcus's jaw tightened. "I'm aware, but it's about documenting abuse of power, intimidation, racial profiling. I want the record to reflect that clearly." The clerk sighed, tapping at a keyboard. "All right, take a seat. Someone will come get your statement." Marcus sat. Duke curled under the bench. He watched the officers passing by, the casual authority in their stride. He realized with a familiar sinking sensation that Rye was not just an isolated problem. He was part of a system that allowed this behavior, that minimized it, that protected it. An hour later, Officer Jenkins arrived to take the statement. Middle-aged, neutral expression, clipboard in hand. "Marcus Whitaker?" "Yes," Marcus said. "Thank you for taking this seriously." Jenkins hesitated. "I will, but these investigations take time, and sometimes the findings don't favor complainant." Marcus took a deep breath. "I understand, but I need it documented. Every detail." He recounted the night of the stop, the threats, the notes left under his door, the cafe encounter, even the comments at the community forum. Dialogue-heavy exchanges in his mind replayed as he spoke, each word weighted with the emotion and tension of the actual events. Jenkins scribbled notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "Did he threaten you physically?" "No," Marcus said, but the intimidation was clear. Hand near the belt, words chosen carefully to instill fear. "It's harassment, even if not assault." Jenkins nodded slowly. "Understood. Did anyone witness any of these incidents?" "Yes. People at the cafe saw him. Some neighbors have noticed the patrols, and I've kept the notes and messages he's left." "Good," Jenkins said. "Documentation helps. Anything else?" Marcus paused, thinking, "I want this to be more than a personal complaint. I want the department to examine how officers use discretion. This pattern is systemic. I'm not the only one." Jenkins didn't respond immediately. The silence hung, tense and uncomfortable. Finally, he said, "We'll see what can be done, but these things move slowly." Marcus nodded, swallowing frustration. "I understand, but slow is better than nothing. And someday, slow could be enough if it's done properly." Back in his apartment, Marcus spread out all the notes, screenshots, timestamps, every minor detail that could support his complaint. He reviewed them meticulously, organizing incidents chronologically. Every text, every note, every comment became part of narrative. Evidence not just of harassment, but of a systemic problem hiding in plain sight. Duke nudged his hand, sensing tension. Marcus rubbed his ears absently, lost in thought. He knew the department might dismiss it, might protect Ryan, might claim ignorance. But he had to try. Someone had to document the abuse, even if it took months, even if the system seemed stacked against him. Later that week, Marcus received a call from Jenkins. "Marcus, there's been an internal review regarding your complaint. It's preliminary, but you should be aware that Officer Ryan has been reassigned temporarily while the investigation proceeds." Marcus felt a surge of cautious relief. Reassigned? For harassment? Jenkins hesitated. For the duration of the investigation. The department is taking your complaint seriously, at least officially. "Thank you," Marcus said. "That's all I wanted, for the record to be taken seriously." After the call, he sat with Duke, the dog resting his head on Marcus's lap. Marcus exhaled slowly, tension easing slightly. But even with the small victory, he felt the emotional toll of the fight pressing down. Fear had a way of lingering, of reminding him that the threat wasn't gone. It was just temporarily postponed. The following week, Marcus received another letter, typed on official department stationery. "We have received your complaint regarding Officer Ryan. An internal investigation has begun. Please provide any additional evidence you may have, including timestamps, witnesses, or documentation of encounters." Marcus stared at the letter, a mixture of relief and determination coursing through him. The system was slow, bureaucratic, sometimes frustrating, but now at least it had begun to acknowledge his voice. He reviewed his notes again, carefully highlighting the most critical points. The night stop, late October, 11:45 p.m. Hand near the belt, verbal intimidation. Notes under the apartment door. Cafe confrontation with witnesses. Community forum remarks. Every detail mattered. Every word could make the difference between dismissal and accountability. Marcus felt a sense of purpose, a clarity he hadn't experienced before. That evening, he called Jason. "They started the investigation," Marcus said, voice tight with restrained excitement. "Ryan's been reassigned, at least for now." "Good," Jason said, "but don't celebrate yet. This is just the beginning. He's going to try to manipulate, to hide, to deny. You have to stay vigilant." "I know," Marcus said, "but at least the system has to acknowledge him now. At least someone has to start listening." Days turned into weeks. Marcus continued documenting encounters, minor and major, compiling evidence, talking to neighbors who had witnessed Ryan's behavior. Each note, each photo, each message became a brick in a wall of accountability. And each night, as he walked Duke, he felt the lingering presence of Ryan's intimidation, but now tempered with resolve. One night, as he returned from a late walk, he found another note slipped beneath his door. "You're persistent. That's dangerous." Marcus held it in his hand, reading it over carefully. The words were a reminder. Fear was never far, even as the investigation moved forward. But instead of panic, he felt clarity. Fear would not dictate his actions. Documentation, vigilance, accountability, those were his weapons. And with them, he had begun to level the playing field. He pinned the note on his corkboard, alongside all the previous documentation. Each piece of paper a testament to resistance, to persistence, to justice. Marcus knew the fight was far from over. Ryan might still wield power, still threaten, still try to intimidate. But Marcus's voice had weight now. His experience was documented, and no badge could erase that truth. Sitting back, he watched Duke curl up at his feet, tail brushing the floor. Marcus exhaled slowly, a quiet determination settling into him. He was ready. Every day, every encounter, every document brought him closer to accountability, closer to exposing abuse of power, closer to proving that courage was more than fear. It was action. Somewhere in the shadows, Officer Ryan remained a threat, but Marcus had begun to illuminate the truth. And truth, he knew, had a way of demanding attention. Marcus had grown accustomed to the tension that clung to his days like a second skin. Even with the internal investigation underway, he felt Ryan's presence in the periphery of every street, every hallway, every glance. But today, Marcus wasn't thinking about fear. He was attending a public community forum on neighborhood safety, an event meant to showcase transparency between law enforcement and citizens. He arrived early, notes in hand, sitting near the back of the crowded auditorium. The room smelled of coffee and polished wood, the hum of quiet conversations filling the air. Marcus tried to focus on his list of questions, the strategic notes about what to ask Ryan if he appeared. The moderator stepped up to the podium. Thank you all for coming tonight. We have a special guest joining our panel to discuss neighborhood safety and federal initiatives for public security. Marcus's heart skipped. His eyes scanned the stage, looking for familiar patrol uniforms for Ryan's smirk. Instead, the moderator continued. Please welcome Mr. David Carrington, head of Homeland Security. The room erupted in polite applause. Marcus blinked. David Carrington, the head of Homeland Security? A voice from the side answered his unspoken question. Yes, he oversees public safety at the federal level, coordinating initiatives nationwide. Marcus's mind spun. Could it be? He had heard the name on the news, seen it in passing on TV, but he hadn't imagined he'd come face to face with someone so powerful. The man took the podium, calm, composed, radiating authority without a hint of arrogance. His eyes scanned the room briefly, then settled on Marcus for a fraction of a second. A fleeting recognition, or merely coincidence? As the forum began, Carrington outlined federal initiatives, emphasizing community engagement, crime prevention, and transparency in policing. Marcus listened, skeptical yet intrigued. He had expected a lecture. He found charisma and gravitas, a voice that could command attention without needing intimidation. Then came the Q&A. Marcus raised his hand, stomach tight. Mr. Carrington, he began, voice steady. How do you ensure that law enforcement officers respect citizens' rights, especially when it comes to racial profiling and intimidation? Carrington's gaze sharpened, and for a moment, Marcus felt the room shrink around them. We train, monitor, and hold officers accountable, Carrington replied. Abuse of authority is unacceptable, and patterns of misconduct are taken seriously. But it requires vigilance from both the public and internal oversight. Marcus's pulse quickened. I asked because I've experienced harassment by a local officer, Officer Ryan, who stopped me while I was walking my dog, threatened me, and tried to intimidate me. It's part of a larger pattern of systemic abuse that many citizens face quietly. The room shifted uncomfortably. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Carrington's eyes focused sharply on Marcus. A pause. Then, unexpectedly, his voice softened, measured. Marcus Whitaker, he said slowly, as if confirming a name in his mind. That's quite specific. Can you elaborate on these incidents? Marcus recounted the encounters. Ryan stopped, the threatening notes, the cafe incident, the community forum altercation. Dialogue-heavy descriptions painted the tension, the fear, the injustice. Carrington listened intently, nodding occasionally, pen poised, facial expressions shifting from curiosity to concern. When Marcus finished, Carrington's gaze lingered. Marcus, I need to know, did you document all of this? Written statements, dates, evidence? Yes, Marcus said. Everything I've gathered, notes, messages, witnesses. I've submitted a formal complaint to the department. Carrington leaned back slightly, silent for a heartbeat. Marcus, you understand the position this puts me in. Officer Ryan, he reports, at times indirectly, to federal programs. Your complaint, if substantiated, could have significant ramifications. Marcus felt the room tighten around him. I didn't know that. I'm just trying to ensure accountability. That's all. Carrington's tone shifted, slightly incredulous. You were stopped and harassed by the head of Homeland Security's direct subordinate? Marcus's stomach dropped. No, not knowingly. I didn't realize it at the time. It's only now, through public records and assignments, that I understand the reach of his influence. The room buzzed quietly, tension threading through the audience. Marcus felt a strange mix of fear and empowerment. The man with the authority to shape national security was listening to him, personally. Carrington's voice was firm but calm. Marcus, thank you for your courage in speaking out. What you've experienced is unacceptable. I will personally ensure that your complaint is reviewed at the highest levels and that Officer Ryan is held accountable for any misuse of authority. Relief surged, but Marcus didn't let himself celebrate. He knew the work was far from over. I appreciate that, sir, but it's bigger than me. It's the system. It's patterns, not just one man. Carrington nodded solemnly. Exactly. And that's why your documentation, your courage, matters. Without it, abuse thrives unchecked. The moderator returned to the podium, attempting to steer the forum back to neutral ground, but the tension lingered, electric and palpable. Audience members whispered among themselves, clearly sensing that a confrontation of power had occurred. Marcus left the forum that evening, Duke at his side, mind racing. The revelation that the man he'd once feared and the system he'd struggled against was now directly accountable to someone like Carrington shifted his perspective. Fear was no longer the only driver. Now there was purpose, clarity, and strategy. Over the following days, Marcus met with Carrington's office privately, detailing every incident, providing documentation, answering questions in full. Dialogue-heavy meetings highlighted accountability, transparency, and the subtle tension of power dynamics. Carrington's questions were probing, precise. Did Officer Ryan make any threats verbally? Yes, Marcus replied. During the night stop and cafe incident, he implied consequences for asserting my rights. Did you feel endangered? Yes. He positioned himself to intimidate, and I believe he could escalate if provoked. Do you have witnesses? Yes. Multiple people observed the cafe interaction, and the internal notes are time-stamped. Carrington nodded. Excellent. This level of detail is crucial. Marcus, what you've done, documenting, speaking out, ensures that we can intervene effectively. Marcus exhaled, tension easing slightly. I just want the system to work the way it's supposed to. Carrington's expression softened, reflective. And that's why you're important. Not just today, not just in this forum, but as someone holding power accountable. It's inconvenient, uncomfortable, necessary work. The days that followed were surreal. Marcus's documentation, combined with Carrington's authority, began to shift the investigation into high gear. Ryan's internal movements were scrutinized, the threat he had imposed on Marcus now exposed under the light of transparency. Still, Marcus felt a quiet cost. The fear had never fully dissipated, and the realization of Ryan's reach made every step, every interaction, laden with caution. He couldn't simply walk at night, carefree. Vigilance was now part of his life. One evening, Marcus sat at his apartment, Duke resting his head on his lap. Marcus stared at his notebook, filled with detailed accounts of Ryan's harassment. It's not over, boy, he murmured softly. But at least now, the right people are watching. Duke nudged his hand, tail thumping lightly. Marcus smiled faintly, recognizing the bond that had kept him grounded through fear and tension. The revelation had changed the landscape of power. Knowledge was now on his side, and courage, once fragile and trembling, had solidified into determined action. As he prepared for another night walk, Marcus felt a strange mixture of relief, fear, and anticipation. Ryan had overstepped. The system now had eyes on him, and Marcus had begun the slow, deliberate work of accountability. Somewhere in the shadows, Officer Ryan was still a threat. But Marcus understood something crucial. The world was bigger than one man's fear, one badge's misuse. Power could be checked, courage could be measured, and truth, documented, undeniable, irrefutable, would demand attention. Marcus opened the door to the night, leash in hand. Duke wagged his tail, sensing his owner's resolve. The street lamp flickered above, shadows long and fragmented, but Marcus walked forward, not unafraid, not unconcerned, but unbowed. And in that quiet, deliberate step into the night, Marcus realized that revelation was not just about knowing. It was about action. Marcus sat at his apartment desk, the glow of his laptop illuminating his focused face. Notes, screenshots, timestamps, and recorded conversations were meticulously organized into folders labeled incident reports, witness statements, notes of department, public records. Each document was a brick in the structure of accountability he was building. Duke rested at his feet, occasionally lifting his head to nudge Marcus when he sensed tension. "I know, boy," Marcus murmured. "It's exhausting." But someone has to do this. He had spoken to Carrington's office over the past week, each call confirming that his complaint had reached the highest levels. Yet Marcus knew systemic abuse was never solved quietly. Real change required visibility, public exposure, undeniable evidence, pressure that no officer could ignore. The first step was local media. Marcus called a reporter he'd spoken to during the forum, a young journalist named Ellie Sanders. "Marcus." Ellie's voice came over the line. "I saw your complaint filed. What's happening?" "I have documentation," Marcus said. "Incidents, notes, messages. I want the public to know the patterns of abuse, how intimidation is normalized. Officer Ryan's actions aren't isolated. They're systemic." Ellie paused. "Are you sure? This could get messy. Really messy. He's powerful." Marcus exhaled tight. "I'm sure. I want people to understand what's happening. Not just for me. So it doesn't happen to someone else." Ellie agreed. "Send me everything. I'll look through it and see how we can frame it." But Marcus, this will make waves. 2 days later, Marcus sat in a small, brightly lit studio. Ellie recorded him for an interview. Cameras, microphones, and the hum of production equipment filled the room. Marcus's hands rested on the desk, fingers intertwined. "Tell me again, Marcus," Ellie said gently. "What happened the night Officer Ryan stopped you?" Marcus took a breath, recalling the cold street, the flashlight slicing across his face, the weight of the badge. "I was walking my dog at night. Officer Ryan stopped me without cause, insinuated criminal intent, and used intimidation to remind me that people like me, black men, were perceived as threats simply because of how we look. He followed up with notes under my door, threats in public spaces, and even at a community forum, he tried to belittle and intimidate me." Ellie's pen hovered over her notepad. "And you documented all of this?" "Yes," Marcus said firmly. "Every incident, every message, every witness. I submitted it to the department, and I'm sharing it now publicly so the pattern cannot be ignored." The cameras rolled, capturing every word. Marcus felt a mixture of fear and resolve. Exposing Ryan meant stepping into public scrutiny, risking backlash, but silence had a cost, too. The next morning, the article went live. "Citizen exposes officers' pattern of harassment and racial intimidation." Marcus scrolled to the comments, some supportive, others venomous, but all undeniable proof that his story was reaching people. Calls came in from news stations, community leaders, and advocacy groups. Some offered legal guidance. Others offered solidarity. Each call, each message reinforced the truth. The public had to see what unchecked power looked like. One evening, as Marcus walked Duke along the familiar streets, a neighbor approached him, cautious but supportive. "Marcus," she said, lowering her voice, "I read your story. Thank you for speaking up. Ryan, he's scared now. People are watching him." Marcus's chest tightened. "I don't want fear to replace justice. I want accountability, not revenge." She nodded. "But your courage has started something. The department is under pressure now. They can't ignore this." Marcus patted Duke's head, absorbing her words. The system was starting to respond, slowly but inevitably. The exposure was working. Days later, Marcus received a call from Carrington. "Marcus, we've reviewed everything," Carrington said, voice calm but firm. "Your documentation, combined with public scrutiny, has forced action. Officer Ryan's conduct is now under formal federal review. Any further intimidation will have serious consequences." Marcus's stomach twisted. Relief, fear, anticipation mingled in one knot. "Thank you. But what about the department?" "Locally, we're coordinating," Carrington replied. "The evidence is compelling. Media attention ensures that local authorities cannot dismiss the severity of the misconduct. The investigation will be transparent and thorough." Marcus exhaled, a deep measure release. Duke nudged his leg, sensing the shift in energy. "We're making progress, boy," he murmured. The tension of exposure came with costs. Each day Marcus walked the streets, he felt eyes on him, whispers in stores, vehicles trailing slightly too long. Ryan wasn't powerless. He still had reach, still had fear to wield. But Marcus's visibility had neutralized some of that power. One evening, He stopped at the corner where Ryan had first confronted him. Flashlight beams had once cut across his face, the weight of authority pressing down. Now, the street felt different, not safe, not entirely free, but no longer a trap. Marcus looked up at the street lamp, shadows stretching, fragmented but less threatening. He remembered Ryan's words, "Not everyone is as forgiving as I am." Now, Marcus could say with certainty, the world wasn't forgiving either. It demanded accountability, demanded consequence, demanded truth. As the investigation progressed, media coverage intensified. News clips aired Marcus recounting the incidents, the story spreading through social media. Interviews emphasized systemic issues, patterns of abuse, and racial profiling. Dialogue from reporters and community members filled every segment. How does this happen in our neighborhood? People need to know their rights and stand up. This officer must be held accountable. Marcus realized the power of narrative. His story wasn't just his. It became a beacon, a warning, a challenge to entrenched authority. Every word spoken publicly forced the system to respond. Then came the first major public reckoning. A press conference was scheduled by the local police department, addressing Marcus's complaint. Ryan was called to explain his conduct. Cameras, microphones, journalists lined the room. Marcus attended. Seated quietly at the back, Duke's presence metaphorical, if not physical. The officer's words were cautious, measured, attempting control. "I followed standard procedure during the incident. Any perception of harassment is unintended." Marcus could hear the room's tension ripple. Whispers, raised eyebrows, reporters murmuring into microphones. He clenched his fists under his seat, noting the cracks in Ryan's composure. After the conference, a reporter approached Marcus. "Your documentation made this unavoidable," she said. "They can't just sweep it under the rug now." Marcus nodded, voice calm. "That's the point. Abuse thrives in silence. Speaking, documenting, exposing, that's how it stops." The exposure brought both victories and costs. Marcus became a symbol, a target, a lightning rod. Anonymous threats arrived, minor vandalism occurred, whispers of retaliation circulated. Yet each incident reinforced the necessity of transparency and persistence. Fear remained, but now paired with resilience. He walked the streets with Duke, documenting, observing, ever vigilant. The public had seen, and the world was holding Ryan accountable. Exposure had turned the tables, but Marcus knew the fight against systemic abuse was ongoing. Courage alone could not end injustice, but could illuminate it, demand change, and inspire others to act. By the end of the month, Internal Affairs confirmed that Officer Ryan's actions were under formal disciplinary review, with recommendations for suspension and mandatory retraining. The system, once complacent, was forced to react. Marcus looked out over the city skyline from his apartment, Duke at his feet. The night was dark, shadows stretching across streets once filled with fear. But light was filtering through, truth visibility, and exposure shining in fragmented, determined streaks. Somewhere, Ryan's authority was waning, his intimidation neutralized by accountability and public scrutiny. Marcus knew this wasn't the end. The system had flaws, and fear still existed. But exposure had shifted the balance, and Marcus's courage, paired with evidence and truth, had begun to dismantle it. And as he walked Duke along the now familiar streets, Marcus realized that exposure was more than revelation. It was a weapon, a shield, and a promise. A promise that fear alone could no longer dictate the lives of the innocent. The morning sunlight cut through Marcus's apartment window in sharp lines, but it did little to pierce the tension that had settled in his chest. Today was the day. The culmination of weeks of documentation, calls, interviews, and public exposure. The moment when Officer Ryan would face the consequences he had long avoided. Marcus paced the small living room, Duke trailing behind him. Every step echoed, every creak of the floorboards a reminder of the stakes. "This is it, boy," he murmured, rubbing Duke's ears. All of it finally comes to light. At the courthouse, the air was thick with anticipation. Cameras lined the halls, journalists whispering into microphones, courthouse staff moving briskly between doors. Marcus clutched his folder tightly, filled with evidence, witness statements, and personal notes. Every page represented fear transformed into accountability. Intimidation met with courage. Inside the courtroom, Officer Ryan sat, posture rigid, uniform immaculate, eyes scanning the room as if searching for control. But for the first time, Marcus noticed a crack in the armor. The smirk faltered when he saw the media presence, the judges and Marcus himself. The judge called the hearing to order. "We are here to address the complaint filed against Officer Ryan, badge number 47, for harassment, intimidation, and abuse of authority. Mr. Whitaker has provided extensive documentation and testimony regarding these incidents." Marcus stood as his name was called, heart hammering, pulse echoing like a drumbeat of accountability. "Yes, Your Honor," he said, voice steady despite the weight of fear and anticipation. The prosecutor began, laying out the pattern. Late-night stops, threats left at Marcus's apartment, the cafe intimidation, the public forum harassment. Each event was recounted with meticulous detail, supported by timestamps, photographs, and witness testimony. The dialogue in the courtroom carried tension, exposing the dissonance between power and justice. Ryan's defense was calculated, a mixture of denial and justification. "I followed standard procedure," he said, voice measured but strained. "Any perception of harassment is unfortunate but unintentional. I acted in accordance with law enforcement guidelines." Marcus could feel the room respond. The subtle shift of doubt in Ryan's favor had evaporated under the weight of evidence. Witnesses spoke. Neighbors who had seen Ryan's threatening behavior, cafe patrons who remembered the confrontation, colleagues who noted patterns of intimidation. Their words punctuated the courtroom like drumbeats of undeniable truth. One by one, statements piled against Ryan's defense, each piece of evidence revealing the systemic nature of his behavior. Marcus listened, heart tight, adrenaline coursing. Dialogue in the room felt electric, a clash of power and consequence, of intimidation versus accountability. Finally, it was Marcus's turn to speak directly. "Your Honor, Officer Ryan used his badge as a weapon, not a tool for protection. He targeted me because of the color of my skin, because he believed authority gave him the right to instill fear. His behavior is not isolated. It reflects a broader issue of unchecked power in law enforcement." The judge listened intently. "Mr. Whitaker, do you understand the gravity of making such claims in this court?" "Yes, Your Honor," Marcus said, holding his folder close. "And I stand by every word. This is about truth, about justice, and ensuring that intimidation is not normalized in our society." Ryan's expression hardened, jaw tightening. The courtroom's energy shifted, a palpable tension building. His carefully constructed persona of control began to crumble as the evidence, the witnesses, and Marcus's courage converged. The judge asked Ryan to respond. "Do you acknowledge any wrongdoing, officer?" Ryan hesitated, eyes darting across the room, searching for allies, for excuses. I did not intend to harass," he said, voice faltering. "I followed procedure." The prosecutor interjected firmly. "Intent is irrelevant when the actions themselves create fear, intimidation, and harassment. Officer Ryan's conduct violated both departmental policy and the rights of Mr. Whitaker." Murky tension filled the air. Marcus felt a surge of vindication, tempered with exhaustion. Weeks of fear, threat, and documentation had led to this moment. The abuser, cornered by truth, finally held accountable. The judge leaned forward, voice resonating. "Based on the evidence presented, Officer Ryan's actions are deemed inappropriate and constitute harassment and abuse of authority. Effective immediately, he is suspended without pay pending further disciplinary review, and mandatory retraining will be imposed. Additionally, the department is required to conduct an internal audit of Officer Ryan's prior conduct to ensure no patterns of abuse are overlooked." Marcus exhaled slowly, tension easing but not fully dissipating. Justice had been served, but the fight had not been purely external. The emotional toll remained, a mixture of trauma, relief, and the lingering weight of fear that had shadowed him since the first night Ryan had stopped him. Duke nudged Marcus's leg. Sensing the shift in energy, Marcus smiled faintly, reaching down to pat his companion. "We made it, boy." The system had to respond. It couldn't ignore the truth. Outside the courthouse, journalists gathered, capturing every statement. Marcus spoke carefully, measured yet resolute. "This isn't just about me," he said. It's about ensuring that abuse of power is exposed, that intimidation is challenged, and that systemic issues in law enforcement are addressed. Accountability is essential for safety, trust, and justice. Reporters nodded, scribbling notes. The cameras rolled, capturing the calm determination in Marcus's voice, a voice that had transformed fear into action. Community members approached, offering words of gratitude and support. One elderly man said, "You've done what many are afraid to do. You've held authority accountable. That takes courage." Marcus shook his head, humility mingling with resolve. It's not just courage, it's responsibility. Someone has to speak up, document, and expose the truth. Otherwise, abuse thrives in silence. Back at his apartment, Marcus reflected on the journey. Duke rested on the floor, tail thumping gently. The notes, the documentation, the public exposure, all had led to this moment of reckoning. Ryan had lost authority, his intimidation neutralized, his misconduct visible to all who chose to see. Yet Marcus felt a quiet sorrow, a lingering weight. The emotional cost was real, the anxiety, the fear, the sleepless nights. Justice had been served excellently, but the internal scars remained. He understood now that courage didn't erase trauma. It transformed it into action. The phone rang. Carrington's voice came through, calm, measured. "Marcus, the actions taken today are the beginning. Officer Ryan's misconduct is now fully documented at federal and local levels. The department is cooperating, and the public scrutiny ensures no shortcuts are taken. I want to commend you for your meticulous documentation and courage. You made a difference." Marcus exhaled, a deep, quiet release. "Thank you, sir. I want this to matter. Not just for me, but for everyone who faces this kind of abuse." Carrington's tone softened. "It does matter. Every step you took, documenting, speaking out, exposing, ensures accountability. That's the change we need." The following week, Marcus noticed subtle shifts in the neighborhood. Patrols were more transparent. Officers spoke with residents instead of looming silently. And neighbors who had once whispered about Ryan now nodded in quiet acknowledgement of Marcus's role in the reckoning. Dialogue and behavior began to reflect accountability, a small but visible change in the culture Ryan had tried to manipulate. One afternoon, a neighbor approached him, smiling. "Marcus, you've changed the atmosphere here. People feel safer. You made them see that fear isn't normal." Marcus nodded, eyes reflecting quiet resolve. "I didn't do it alone. Documentation, witnesses, public exposure, all counts. But it's true, courage, when paired with evidence, can force change." Yet Marcus remained vigilant. Even as Ryan faced consequences, Marcus understood that fear, bias, and abuse were systemic, not just individual. Each night walk with Duke reminded him of the persistence required. Change was gradual, accountability ongoing. But the reckoning had proven one essential truth. Power could be challenged and justice could prevail. Marcus looked out over the city skyline, Duke at his feet. Shadows stretched across streets once filled with fear. But now light, truth, visibility, accountability filtered through. And Marcus realized that the reckoning wasn't just Ryan's downfall. It was a testament of persistence, courage, and the quiet, relentless power of holding truth to authority. He knelt, patting Duke's head, and whispered, "We're not done, boy. But tonight, we've won a step. Justice is real, and fear doesn't get the last word." The city hummed below, indifferent yet observant. Marcus exhaled, shoulders easing slightly, but eyes sharp. Shadows might remain, but the reckoning had begun, and he had played his part. The city moved on, oblivious to the small victories and personal battles waged in its streets. But Marcus knew better. Each step he took, each glance at the streetlights, every evening walk with Duke, reminded him that the fight against fear and intimidation had consequences, both external and internal. Inside his apartment, sunlight poured across the living room, illuminating stacks of documentation, notes, and photographs. Marcus ran his fingers over the papers, the ink and print a testament to courage, persistence, and the long, grueling process of accountability. Duke rested nearby, tail flicking lazily. The internal investigation had concluded. Officer Ryan was officially suspended. pending further disciplinary action. His reputation, carefully constructed over years, was fractured in the public eye. Media coverage had amplified the consequences, ensuring transparency. The abuser had faced a system, and the system, bolstered by Marcus's documentation and courage, had acted. Yet Marcus did not feel triumphant. Relief mingled with exhaustion, and a lingering ache reminded him of the emotional cost. The nights of fear, the sleepless hours replaying threats, the anxiety of confrontation. It all had left traces that even success could not erase. Marcus picked up the phone and called Jason. "It's done," he said quietly, voice tinged with weariness. "Ryan's been suspended. Federal review, public scrutiny, he's facing consequences." Jason's tone was measured, thoughtful. "That's good. You've held him accountable. But don't forget yourself in the process. You've carried a lot, Marcus. Make sure you take care of your own mental space." "I know," Marcus admitted. "It's strange. I wanted justice. I fought for accountability. But I feel hollow somehow. Victory is real, but it's not clean. There's trauma beneath it." "That's normal," Jason replied. "You've been targeted. Your courage was tested. You can acknowledge the cost and still celebrate the impact. It doesn't have to be one or the other." Marcus nodded, hanging up, reflecting on Jason's words. He poured a cup of tea, sat in the window seat, and looked out at the city below. The streets were alive, unaware, indifferent, but Marcus had changed them, even if subtly. He had transformed fear into action, intimidation into accountability. Days later, Marcus attended a community town hall, invited as a speaker to share his experience. The room was packed with residents, local leaders, and media representatives. He stood at the podium, Duke quietly waiting at the side, ears alert to the murmur of the crowd. "Thank you all for being here," Marcus began, voice steady. "I want to share my story, not for attention, not for glory, but to ensure that no one else feels powerless in the face of intimidation or abuse of authority." He recounted the harassment by Officer Ryan, the notes under his door, the cafe confrontation, and the community forum threats. But he also shared the path to accountability: documentation, public exposure, collaboration with authorities, and perseverance. Dialogue dominated his speech, as he included exchanges with Ryan, neighbors, and officials. "You're persistent. That's dangerous. Accountability is essential. Fear cannot dictate our lives. The system may be slow, but truth and evidence force action." The audience reacted with murmurs of empathy and understanding. Some nodded. Others whispered encouragement. Marcus realized that the story wasn't just his. It belonged to the community, to every person subjected to intimidation, and to everyone witnessing systemic abuse. Afterward, residents approached him. A young woman said, "I've been afraid to report harassment at work and by police. Your story gives me courage." "Thank you." Marcus smiled, humility and empathy threading through his words. "We all have to stand together. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's action in spite of it."